Hi everybody. So today I'm going to do a video on fairies, or the fae folk, or the she, or the little people, or the wee folk. There are loads of different names and terminologies for them in different cultures. It varies. However, from experience and from a lot of people that I've kind of come across that have worked with them, have suggested that the Fae don't particularly like being called fairies. They much prefer the little people or the Fae. One of the things about the Fae is you have to realise that they're actually very, very different from us. They have very different morals, very different ethics. For instance, things to them that, if you have things going around missing in the house, maybe, for instance, if it's your wallet or it's, for instance, a photograph or something, something quite random as well, like a book or like a tool that you really wanted. A lot of the time, things that aren't particularly as important to us can be very, very important to them, and they'll borrow things. There's no telling when they'll give them back, though, but they'll borrow things. The best you can kind of do is give an offering and just be like, look, if you have, please, 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 blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of folklore as well with the Fae about being thankful. So if you say thank you, it will offend them. Also, if you give them clothes, it will also offend them. The Brownie, which is a hearth spirit that, if you're lucky enough to have a Brownie, is a hearth spirit that's said to go around the house and clean up and tidy up. And you leave like a butter roll for him, like saffron butter roll, and some milk, and he'll do the cleaning. It's a very old custom, but however, if you are to thank him and acknowledge him a lot and give him clothes, that is said to offend him. So there's a lot of references in folklore about saying thank you to the Fae. Maybe instead, if you want to show your appreciation, you can be like, I really appreciate what you have done for me. Here is blah, 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 just to show you how much I appreciate it. And it's very, very hard to actually not say thank you, especially if you're British, because it's kind of embedded in us. But anyway, a lot of people have this image of fairies as winged beings that are glittery and flittery and run around and are very sweet and stuff like that. The reason for that is due to a lot of romanticism in the Victorian era. And there was that, and that had actually had quite a huge impact on the modern depiction and image that we have today of fairies. So I'm just trying to throw in as much as I possibly can. So forgive me if I don't get everything, They hate iron. By folklore, iron is said to repel fairies, as well as holy water as well, if you believe that fairies are satanic. There's a lot of ties in particularly British folklore that say basically that fairies brought people to the devil and had ties to the devil. Witch trials such as Isabel Gowdy, she mentioned that. Fairies and witches just totally intertwine all the time. In fact, I just watched a video by Kissy the Dreamer that kind of spurred me on to do a little bit of information about the Fae and working with them and possibly some pointers for working with them. Yes, sorry, losing sight. There's so much information that I kind of have about them. They're tricksters. They will trick you. And the thing is, you can't. Each and every individual Fae will be different from the next one. So if you have this huge group of all these different people, kind of be careful, because there may be one in there that might want to trick you. 9 times out of 10, there's going to be. I'll give you a funny story. Well, not really funny. It was quite sinister and dark. But I actually cast a money spell. And I asked the Fae, and I asked for them to help me to basically give me money that I needed. This is one of the many mistakes that I have made, and I own up to making many mistakes, because how else do you learn? If somebody who practices witchcraft says, no, I haven't made any mistakes, they're lying. I don't care what you say, they're lying. Basically, I asked the Fae for money and done the spell, and it felt amazing. And I was seeing Fae actually climbing up the walls. It was very, very intense. But I was like, whoa, but I got a very good feeling from it. It was very positive, very benevolent. In fact, I asked for Fae that wouldn't do me any harm, that Fae that would come through that would, well, I didn't. I asked for Fae that would be positive and benevolent. So, cast a spell. And so the next day I woke up and I had a message from Facebook, and it was from somebody who lives in Tennessee, a hoodoo worker and a root worker. And he basically said to me, George, what the fuck have you done? When I asked why, he said that he had had a dream that night that he'd just woke up, and this was at 6 a.m. He had had a dream that basically there were, it was very dark and there was an old woman standing there. And she looked at him and she said, tell George they're coming for him. So absolutely terrified, I kind of said, look, I withdraw everything I say. However, I still got what I asked for. But it kind of didn't stop them, because I actually teach group exercise, and I asked for a class as well to help aid money. And there were a lot of accidents in that class. I have loads of years of dance teaching, because I'm a trained ballet dancer originally, but I have a lot of years of dance before. Well, a year after I graduated, I danced in Disney, which was good fun. But I taught quite a lot of dance and studied the body and studied various different movements. So I'm always learning, but I know that they weren't particularly my mistakes, because people would slip, people would trip over on nothing. One poor woman snapped her hamstring, which I heard a pop, which was horrific, and basically, had to go out. 2 people collapsed, and it's never ever happened to me in any other class apart from that class, which I found very odd. So be careful. What may seem okay to you might not seem okay to the Fae. What may seem normal to you will not necessarily seem normal to the Fae. The Fae are regarded as well, or the she, as tipsy-turvy. So basically, there's a lot of people have visited fairyland, and when it's summer, they've visited fairyland and it's been winter. And when it's been winter, they've visited fairyland and they've been dancing around a maypole. There are a lot of references to that. However, one pointer, if you do work with the Fae, do not eat any food they give you. By folklore, they have the right to claim you. There are really terrifying stories about people eating food and being taken for 7 years. The word 7 years as an amount of time seems to be something that plays a part in fairy lore as well. Not just that, fairy time is meant to actually operate differently from what the normal mundane time would. What would seem like 5 minutes in fairyland can actually be like 2 weeks. So there's a lot of different references to that. Thomas the Rhymer as well, that is a very old folk song, and it's about the Queen of Elfame. And she seeks Thomas, and she comes through on a white steed with bells, and she's very gorgeous, and she takes him for 7 years, and he comes back, but it comes back to bite him in the arse. So yes, as I said, I don't believe in bad and good. I believe in neutral energy. Like a neutrality. I don't believe one being is pure good and one being is pure bad. I believe all is neutral. Everything is grey. My personal belief. With the Fae, of course, they're neutral, but there's so many of them, as I was saying. So there will be different types of Fae as well, from hobgoblins to brownies to undines to selkies to kelpies to gnomes to elves, light elves and dark elves, to leprechauns to pixies or piskies. There's a lot of different types of Fae. So yeah, always be careful when working with them. And one of a good thing to have when you work with the Fae is something known as a counterpart, which is basically, that will be your guide. That is basically a Fae or a fairy that is said to be your guide, that will protect you and help you when working with the Fae, because you kind of need that protection when working with them. So how does somebody actually go around getting a counterpart? Well, there are different ways, or are different ways of doing things. However, I would recommend getting a counterpart before any work with the Fae, just to be on the safe side, because they really are unpredictable. Not all fairies are pure and love and light. It's not like that. By folklore, these can be things that can be quite terrifying and can kill people, and have killed people, and have kidnapped people, and have fairy napped people. So, but it's not a thing that's all love and light. That was very much a Victorian romantic era of that image of the Fae. Of course, there's going to be what we perceive to be very benevolent Fae. Of course there will be, I've met some, but just be wary. So how does somebody actually go around into having a counterpart? So, as again, various different ways. One particular good visualization I have learned, and it's just a visualization, lay a compass round, state why you're laying the compass round, and then it's basically a meditation, a visualization. And you're at a well, and there are, white thorns there, and, black thorns, and there's all these fairy trees, and hazel, and and elder, and birch, and, there's this lovely well. And in its water, you see emitting a green light, a glowing green light. And you go into the well and you walk down the steps. And you go deeper and deeper and deeper, spiraling lower and lower and lower. You then get to a big wooden door, and you knock 3 times, and you go into the room, and there is loads of people, and sat on a throne, on 2 thrones, is the fairy queen and the fairy king. And you basically ask them if you can have a counterpart to help you work with the Fae. And there, from a crowd of people, will step out your counterpart. You tell them how much you appreciate it. Don't thank them. They don't like being thanked. Never really met a Fae that enjoys being thanked. And you travel up the steps again, and you go up, and you go up, and you go up, and you get out of the well, and as you sort of walk away from the trees, you imagine bringing your counterpart into this world. Your counterpart will then give you a name, and then you can go ahead and start to work with the Fae. Now, of course, it's not as quickly as that. There is a lot of visualization to it. Really break down this visualization that I've given you. It's not just a 1 minute, 2 minute thing. This takes a lot of energy and a lot of energy and a lot of visualization and a lot of trance. Try and put yourself into a very heavy trance. So once you have your counterpart, how can we start to establish a working relationship with the Fae? So one of the books I'm going to read from you is Nigel Jackson, Call of the Hornpipe. And this is on page 59 under Fairy Witchcraft and the Geography of Elfland. And states, to make a fairy offering is a simple thing in itself, and is actually a mystical communion which unifies the living above the land and the hallowed ancestors below. A cup of wine, beer or milk, and a cake or piece of bread is consecrated with these words. Assain this drink and this bread in the power of the Queen of Elfland, Morgan the goddess, and in the power of Gwyn, the king of the fairy and the horned master of the fairy raid. Each celebrant takes a sip from the cup and a piece of the bread, and the remainder is poured and left upon the earth, stone, or amongst the roots of a fairy tree with these words. Blessings upon the deep ones in the hollow hills, blessings upon the fairy people within the land, and the fairy blessing be upon us. Just one of the ways. When you go out and you make a fairy offering, go out into the woods, go out into the wilderness, spend a day. Twilight tends to be a time when you'll see fairies, when fairy power or energy or presence is felt quite strongly. So that's dawn, it's dusk, it's 12 o'clock as well. is regarded as that betwixt time, that in-between time. Special holy days as well of the year, for instance, Midsummer, Halloween, Samhain, Beltane, you'll sense a presence of the Fae then. So there's different days, you know, St. John's Eve as well is meant to be. Oh, and Good Friday, there are references, I believe, to Good Friday. I'm not completely sure. Don't quote me on that one. But actually go out and commune with them. I done it and then sat there and got absolutely bit to smithereens by mosquitoes, and it was kind of a little bit of a laugh and a practical joke. My mate, however, absolutely fine. Now, I could just have very, very sweet blood, and they could like that. However, I saw something about that straight after I'd done the offering. I started coming up in bites and gnat bites and stuff like that. So they will trick you. You will be a laughingstock. If you do get something known as fairy lead, which is basically where you will get lost walking, trying to find your way home, and you'll pass the same place over and over and over and over again. And I've heard many stories of people in Britain to this day still that get fairy lead. A common thing that will stop being fairy lead is if you turn your clothes inside out. That's said to combat them. What offerings do you give to the Fae? So what offerings can you give to the Fae? Milk, honey, fairy cakes, cupcakes. You know, if you make a cake yourself, that's fine, that's good. Also, if you actually make something from your hands, and actually make something for the Fae, because it's made by human hands and the Fae can't physically make things like that, they will appreciate that because it will be different and unique. Make sure it's not damaging to the earth. So yeah, you can make like a little mannequin, and I don't know. Milk and honey. One of the things I've actually heard of people offering, which makes a lot of sense to me, and this is very modern, is pick and mix, which is basically different selections of different sweets. And the idea is, because the Fae there are so many of them, if you give a pick and mix with different varieties of different flavours of different sweets, you're much more likely to kind of please everyone, as it were. I've heard of people trying to give jelly and ice cream to the Fae. Do not do that. I personally wouldn't do that. It seems very stupid. It seems a very stupid thing to do, because I'm pretty sure jellies, it's just so man-made. Just don't bother with it. I wouldn't personally. Mind you, pick and mixes, I guess. Pick and mix is very, very man-made. I've used Yorkshire mixtures in offerings, and stuff like that. So, whereabouts would you find the Fae? So there are loads of different places you'll find the Fae, particularly betwixt places. So, if you see a tree that grows out two trees from one root and splits down the middle, that's known as a fairy tree. And you can make a wish, but you hold the tree and you make your wish and you walk through it and you leave an offering. I once done that. I went through the tree, asked to empower a spell that I wanted, walked through, and I got booted, and I rolled down this hill in this massive wild forest. And yeah, so also other places as well are wells, rivers, springs, lakes, loads of different places that are in between. In particularly places like churchyards tend to be places that are have history of Fae energies and Fae places to them. So there are those kind of references in that too. Brooks, underneath a whitethorn tree as well. Whitethorn or hawthorn is said to be a tree that's very sacred to the Fae, very sacred to the Fae folk. And so what you can do is you can actually do spells underneath a hawthorn or a whitethorn tree. It's said if you snap the whitethorn, then the blood of the tree will come out and fairies will latch themselves onto you. So be very careful. So what book can I recommend that will get someone kind of started up with the Fae, kind of a kickstart guide to the Fae and working with them? Well, I've been lended this, The Fairy Bible by Theresa Marbury, and it is fantastic. There are so many different so many different things in there, so many different references to Fae, different types of Fae. It goes into the folklore of things as well. It goes into all the different folklore of all different Fae, and some of it is, quite frankly, a little terrifying. However, you know, it's very, very interesting. Where is... Trying to find my favourite kind of section. Okay, so you got like dwarfs. This always makes me laugh, this word, knockers, which are Cornish minus Fae. There's just loads of stuff like Gwynedd Nud. There is so much folklore on Fae. This video is like 20 minutes and I still haven't even began to talk about the rest of the folklore attached to the Fae and a lot of stories that I have had experience in the Fae. So yeah, I hope this video has helped, and fairy blessings.